Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me out a lot. So today's video is about how you can learn a language with Netflix. I recently made a video about how to learn a language with YouTube and I encourage you to check that out. But today's video is all about Netflix. And I often mention Netflix when I talk about developing your listening skills because it's a great resource, but I never really talk about how you can do that specifically. So today I'm going to give you some specific tips for how you can use Netflix to learn a foreign language. So I recently discovered, and I was probably quite late to discover that because I'm sure that many of you will know about this already, that you can filter on Netflix by audio language and subtitle language, which is really interesting because when I used to look for international shows on Netflix, I would just scroll down to the international section and then see what's available. But actually you can go to the filters. So when you're using it on desktop, it's at the bottom. This might change obviously, but there is a way to get to a section where you can filter by audio language and subtitle language. So that way, if you're interested in something that has French audio, for example, you can just look at those titles. So when I filtered by audio, there was actually a surprising number of languages available, and there were not just the kind of obvious languages like French, German or Cantonese. There were lots of different languages available, including less common languages or languages that are less common to learn as a foreign language. Languages such as Romanian, Polish or even Tagalog. So it's really great that you can filter by those languages. So if you're learning one of those niche languages, and people often complain that if there aren't enough resources, you can now go on Netflix and you can filter by those languages. So the audio in those different shows will differ. When you select audio in French, it might be a different type of audio than in German or in Polish, for example. And I think that's dictated by the kind of established practices for producing audio in that country or geographical region. So, for example, when you watch something in Polish, sometimes it might be dubbed, but most of the time there will be a sort of voiceover. So this is quite a strange thing for people who go to Poland and put the TV on and experience that for the first time. It's basically a way to almost like dub but keep the original language as well. So you can hear the original language in the background and it's slightly softer, but over that you can hear voiceover in Polish, so somebody reading out the Polish script, and it's always the same person, so there's no different actors, no different voices, it's just one person reading it out. So when you're Polish, you're completely used to it because it's just something that you don't even notice, something that's just always there. But when you're not familiar with this type of audio, you might be a little bit unsure about whether that's something that will work for you. So when you select different audio versions or different audio languages in Netflix, some of them will be voiceovers, some of them will be dubbing, which means that the original language is completely erased and replaced by audio in that language, and they will use different actors to replace the original actors' voices. So it will be a bit more natural than the voiceover, and sometimes it will just be the original audio. So when you filter in Netflix, it will just also show you the shows that were produced in that language originally. So I would definitely encourage you to put subtitles on at the same time as watching the audio in a foreign language. So you can do different things. You can use subtitles in that language, or you can use subtitles in your native language or in English or maybe another language that you're learning. You can kind of mix and match and see what works for you. But the easiest thing might be to just put the subtitles on in the language, in the same language as the audio, so that you can listen and read at the same time. And that way, if there is anything that you didn't get, you can look at the subtitles again, you can pause and you can see what was being said. If you don't know the word, you can then look it up in a dictionary. So when it comes to subtitles in Netflix, there are fewer options than there are for audio. So you can choose from audio in many different languages, but the subtitle selection is a little bit more limited. So it focuses mainly on the kind of most used languages, I suppose. I'm not sure how they made that selection, but you will see what I mean when you get there. So for shows that don't have the audio in the language that you're learning, you can always watch it in English and you can put foreign subtitles on at the same time. For example, you can watch an American show in English and you can put subtitles on in French, and that way you will be able to see how you say different things in French. So you will be listening to English, which presumably is a language you're familiar with because you're watching this in English, and you will already know what the meaning is. So you will be looking at the subtitles and almost like seeing the translation of that, which is quite an interesting exercise as well. You can try that for the shows that don't have audio in the language you're learning. So another tip I've got for you for watching Netflix is that there are plenty of children's shows on Netflix, and children's shows can actually be quite good for learning foreign languages because language tends to be less complex. They use sort of fewer complex phrases or complex vocabulary, especially the shows for the youngest learners who are only just beginning to learn to speak. Try things like Peppa Pig, for example, which is a very popular show among very young children. Try that and see how it goes. You will also notice that there are fewer kind of metaphors or things that you might not be able to understand otherwise, such as humor. So humor is quite difficult to understand when you're learning a foreign language. But there won't be things like that in children's shows. I mean, there will be some types of humor, but it won't be too kind of sophisticated because obviously it's aimed at an age group that is less fluent. So try that as well and see how it goes. So in addition to the things that I've just mentioned, there is also a Chrome extension that you can use with Netflix, and it's called Language Learning with Netflix, which will give you some additional features that are not available just in Netflix. So I haven't actually used this extension before, but I've done some reading about it and there's some good opinions from people who have used it. So some of the things that it includes is, for example, the ability to see two different sets of subtitles at the same time. So you can see the original language and the subtitle language, which is really interesting because then you can compare how things are said in two different languages. You can see the translation straight away. You can see the meaning in the language that you're more familiar with. You can also change playback speed, which is something that I mentioned in my video about learning languages with YouTube. So changing playback speed will allow you to basically focus a little bit more on what's being said and understanding things a little bit more easily because it will be slower. Another feature in the Chrome extension is that you can it highlights different words that are potentially interesting words for you to learn, which is really useful because then you can kind of just concentrate on those words, or there might be useful words to look up in a dictionary. And there is also a pop-up dictionary that kind of pops up so you can check what the different words mean. So another tip, in addition to this extension that I've got for you, is that you could try watching shows that you have seen before. Because when you watch something that you're familiar with already, you will not be focusing too much on the meaning, but you will just be focusing on the language because you know what the storyline is. So for example, I don't know if there's any show that you're interested in that you have seen before, preferably recently so that you remember the plot. Put that on and just try to focus on the language because you will be able to switch off that part of your brain that is kind of following along with the plot and trying to work out what's going to happen next. So that's potentially quite a useful tip as well. So finally, my final tip is something that I mention in most of my videos about practicing your listening skills, and that's basically pausing, repeating, and creating your own language. So whenever you're watching something on Netflix, I encourage you to pause every 30 seconds or so, or even every couple of sentences. Repeat what's just been said, especially when you've got it written on the screen in the subtitles. And then try to create your own sentence that is similar to the sentence that you've just said. So it can be similar because it's got a similar topic, similar vocabulary, it uses a similar structure or a similar kind of grammar point. The whole point is to repeat it, internalize it, and then create your own version. So create your own language, because that way you're practicing listening and speaking at the same time, but you're also sort of internalizing the language as well. So try that and let me know in the comments how it goes, and also whether you use Netflix for learning languages and what your favorite tip is. And thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, make sure you switch on notifications as well. And I'll see you next time. Bye!